In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.
Hi, welcome to Materialise, the Launch Tabletop podcast. And I've not got my cue set up in the right place. Every week I get this wrong. So for those playing at home, I've listened to every episode. I wonder if there's even a single one where I got it right first go. Let's go again. Hi, welcome to Materialise, the Launch Tabletop podcast, where we talk about turning game ideas into tangible objects. Today is the 23rd of December, 2022, and this is episode 8. This week's topic is flying solo, being a single-person board game publisher. All right. Technical errors and human errors aside, I am your host, Eris, and with me today is Kate. Hi, Kate. You're on mute.
Oh, we're having such a day of it, aren't we?
It's definitely a Friday, that's for sure.
Can you tell it's the end of the year?
That's right, not just a Friday. It's like a second last one of the year, yeah.
Whew.
All right, how are you?
I fell down the stairs this morning. How are you?
Oh.
I have
I'm better than
bruises
that.
in places, and I've got a sprained ankle. Other than that, I'm alive.
Well, I guess being alive is a good thing.
Yeah.
And we're also joined by Alan again. Hello, Alan.
Hello.
Although I must admit, in my script, I said, and Alan Chang, hi Alan Chang, because every other time you've been on the show, you've been Alan Chang, and today you're just Alan. So now, my script's out of date.
I was hoping that the full name was going to catch on, but every week it hasn't. So I've decided to fall back to what you guys are doing.
Ah,
Confusion.
fair enough. So maybe in the future we'll trick you and we'll put our full names on just to turn things around. How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been good. I mean, everybody, extended family, relatives, and kids are already on holiday mode. So it makes it quite difficult to stay sharp.
Yeah. But I'm sure you've got a tool that can help you stay sharp, though, right?
Oh yes, funny you should ask.
So for those who haven't watched previous episodes of for Shannon, every single episode that Alan's been on, he's had power tools involved. So it's just been an interesting experience because Alan is doing his house renovations amongst other things.
Well, let's get that one over and done with really quickly.
Okay, fair enough.
And this week's recommendation of power tools for Alan.
I do need to get a power tool because what have I got? I've got nothing.
Oh, what have we got?
The Festool track tool.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, it's
What is it? Sorry, I didn't hear quite that clearly.
The
Festool track saw
is the brand.
Oh, track saw. Okay.
It's a saw, but it sits on a very long track and it plunges in and then does a cut. But what's particularly good about the Festool is that, well, first of all, this is a battery version of it.
And we should say we are not sponsored by any power tool companies whatsoever.
But we should absolutely get Festool on at this point. Yeah, because this is not the first time we've mentioned them.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying about the track saw, yeah.
So typically with a lot of standard sort of circular saws or even many sort of job site table saws, they're really meant for rough ripping and cutting. So what you get is edges that have what they call blowouts with wood. You get like pieces of chips in them. And if you're doing cabinet making, especially if you're doing melamine laminated, so those are the white kind of, the standard IKEA things where you've got like corkboard and then you've got the laminated pieces over the top. They're really easy to chip.
Okay.
So the Festool track saw is really, really good at cutting very, very clean lines. They're sort of specifically known for that. So yeah,
awesome.
That's an expensive piece of equipment, but you can do some really good, nice detail work with it. And I apologize for teaching people or talking about things that is not related to board games.
Hey, no, this is all part of it. We're all humans. It's all good. The thing that I like about a lot of the shows that I watch and podcasts I listen to is when people are allowed to just express more of them than just this specific niche thing. So I think it's very interesting. And also, who knows? I mean, I remember you put up a video, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even 6 years ago, showing how to make prototypes and stuff, and you absolutely used some different, methods and tools and stuff in there. So I think there is relevance.
Yeah, well, the relevance, I think, like even the name of the publishing company that I had previously, it's called Rule and Make, and there's definitely a lot of like physical craft that sort of embodies the whole sort of DNA of the company. So yeah, I guess that it does bear some relevance.
And maybe in the future we'll see you show us how to hand carve some meeples or something like that.
Actually, you just got some really good ideas. Yeah,
I've seen a few years ago someone had a really big one that was done, like made for them, and like as an ornament type thing.
Do you have a scroll saw?
Yes, I have a scroll saw. The only thing I don't have is a lathe, and to do sort of extrusion, sort of long pieces. Yeah, lathe is really awesome. So that's the only thing I don't have. Yeah.
There you go. We'll have to. Maybe that'll be we'll buy you one in the future when we're all rich and famous.
Christmas is in 2 days. Who knows?
They're not cheap. They're big machines. The ones that I want, at least. Yeah.
And we'll move on and say hi, Shannon, our special guest. So welcome. Hello. Very delayed introduction,
I
but
it was Power Tool.
That's really what the show's about. Yeah. So Shannon, how's your week been?
Yeah, it's wrapping up just before Christmas, which is nice. I feel like the last 2 months have been so incredibly busy that I haven't actually had a chance to do anything. So really the last 2 days I've been playing Destiny until I get tired, and then I switch over to Marvel's Midnight Suns for a bit and play that till I get tired, and then go back to Destiny.
How Midnight Suns? I wanted to play it. I don't have a stretch of time to do it, but that's the one game that I've been sort of waiting on to play.
If you'd asked me yesterday, I would have said it's amazing and it's flawless. If you asked me, well, you're asking me today, I've certainly run across some of the jankiness of the build that people are talking about. I have had to reset it 3 times today. It's crashed twice, and third time one of the enemies ran into my character, got stuck in the running animation, and I had to close the PlayStation down to reset it.
So I'm a Skyrim player, and it's pretty much my favorite video game, and those sound like typical Skyrim problems where you've got like weird like things floating or like stuff intermingling. So it's amazing to think that 10 or so years later games are still doing that stuff.
It has a good autosave, which is its saving grace.
Oh, good.
But actually quite good for anyone. Yes, bringing it back to board games is actually quite a board gamey kind of like tabletop video game that a lot of people are comparing to Slay the Spire for its deck building aspects. So like it has a really addictive cycle where you kind of play a mission and then you go and you just chat and have a beach party with Spider-Man and then upgrade his cards, and then you go back and go into another mission to get some more resources.
A quick background. So Marvel Midnight Suns is developed by Firaxis, who you may know famously is Sid Meier Games.
Oh, okay.
I swallowed a midgie.
I think they're famous for XCOM recently, and so a lot of people were looking at this and thinking it would be the next XCOM. But more realistically, I would say it's kind of more like D&D 4th edition in terms of its tactical placement and use of abilities that are like cards that sort of come up quite often. And so it's an interesting mix, but really, really enjoying it. The weird thing is getting used to a Doctor Strange and an Iron Man that are not Robert Downey Jr. and Benedict Cumberbatch. And I really like the voice actors, but it took me a little while kind of wrap my head around that it's not the MCU.
I bought a PS1 when after the PS2 came out. They released a PS1 in a smaller enclosure with a more rounded shape, and it was like $100, and it was, so I could actually afford it. I was a student, and so I bought that, and that was like my first kind of console that I ever owned. And one of the first games I got, and I didn't actually have many games, the only games I got was a Marvel like fighting game, so sort of like Street Fighter but with Marvel characters. And this is around the time, this would have been X-Men might have just come out, like not long before. So I think it was actually called Mutant Academy. It was all X-Men focused. But they didn't obviously have the same people. So you didn't have like, now I've totally blanked on his name. Wolverine. Who's Wolverine? Hugh Jackman. It wasn't like Hugh Jackman doing the voice of Wolverine or anything. And so yeah, similar kind of vibe, like similar idea of like these characters who you know from one place and then they're different in another. All right, so now we've covered power tools and superhero video games. I might introduce Shannon properly and say Shannon is the founder of Foxtail Games and is the designer of Lucidity, Six-Sided Nightmares, as well as Runica and the Six-Sided Spellbooks. I'm seeing a pattern in your game names there. So, hi Shannon, and I'll formally say welcome. So today we're going to be talking a bit about, later on, we'll talk a bit about what it's like being a solo board game publisher, so where you don't have a huge team around you, it is just you kind of doing it. But before we get into that, we're going to do our regular segment, which is our launch table tip. This week, each week we kind of try and share a little bit of piece of advice that could help game creators and makers in with what they're doing. This week, Kate, you've got a topic that you want to bring up for us.
Yes. So when we were thinking about the tip for today, I sort of on the Slack put out the question and said, hey, anybody got any ideas? What's been happening this week? And Jason piped up and said, you should talk about the colour implications with colour blindness and designing for players who don't have what's regarded as normal colour vision. So I went, that's a fantastic idea, because we've been having a conversation about it. So I decided that I would look at, because we were talking about traditional Euro colours. So I grabbed, we don't have a whole lot of Euros here because we're more of a thematic place than a bit of a sort of a Euro household. But I grabbed three.
You're going to start some wars there saying that Euro games have no theme. Gosh.
I didn't say that. I said I prefer thematic rather than Euro. Well, look, I can call it Ameritrash, but we're trying not to refer to it as Ameritrash.
I was going to say, I'm pretty certain that term's being relegated, isn't it, or whatever? Yeah.
So.
Okay, yeah. So.
Anyway, so I grabbed Carcassonne, which of course has a whole lot of meeples, and I grabbed Power Grid, which I love. I don't think this gets enough love, but you know, I don't.
So is Carcassonne
like
only five? Does Carcassonne only go to 5 players? I hadn't tweaked that.
And one that's less commonly known, Thurn and Taxis, which I really enjoy. This is good fun.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's old school, baby. It's 2006. And then one that is not a Euro. So shout out to Druid City. Hey, James. Grim Masquerade, because this is the exception. I was like, well, you know, all of these use the same colours. So I took some pictures and you can see we've got Carcassonne has meeples and we've got 5 colours. We've got black and green and yellow and red and blue. And Power Grid go crazy. You have 6 players. They've got black and green and yellow and red and blue and purple. Ooh. Thurn and Taxis only has 4 players, green, yellow, red and blue. And I was interested for a start just to see how different the greens and yellows and reds and blues were. And they're virtually identical, which...
If they were all made, are they all weird. German? Are they all Carcassonne? Because if they're all printed by because Ludofact is like the Alan, you can you might be able to tell me if I'm wrong, but if it's all through the same factory, that's possible.
And in Texas says made in Germany, that's upside down, but it doesn't actually say where that one was made. I'm going to assume that because it's Rio Grande as well, it was probably also made in Germany. Carcassonne.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't always will be with Ludofact, and in fact, different print runs will have different manufacturers as well. So it's
true. Yeah, I've heard that too. I think I remember hearing a few years ago, Portal Games, Ignacy Trevicek would said that he would do his initial run in Poland. Did they have a printer in Poland? In Europe, anyway. He'd have a European print. Yeah, I know he's in Poland. I couldn't remember if they've got a printer in Poland or not, but he would do his initial run in Europe, but then he would do all of his second, like any further print runs would be done in China. And no, I don't know if that's still the case, but about 4 or 5 years ago, that was what he said. So yeah, interesting.
Yes. So this one, however, was not. This one is definitely printed in China. This was printed with Ninox.
Oh yeah.
So Grim Masquerade, as you can see, has really different coloured tokens, and I know for a fact that those token colours were picked with making it easy for people with colour deficiency to be able to differentiate them easily. So the others, I'm going to assume that they weren't. So I went, okay, well, let's take a picture of all of these and let's run them through the Codeless simulator. So Codeless stands for Color Blind Simulator. So we have a banner with that particular website.
Yep.
It's a long one, I know, but that's the URL.
But it looks like it's just colorblindness.com might be the quickest way to get there.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you just bring the banner up back up.
If you search for Codeless, it'll come up.
Nice.
I've found this really useful because I'm not colorblind. The stats are 1 in 12 males, and it's all talking about males and females. So anyone who doesn't regard themselves as fitting into those camps, it's not. I'm not trying to ignore the fact that people exist who don't fit neatly into those. It's just all of the research talks about that. So I don't know how that impacts on other things. So they say because it is an X-linked trait for the majority of the causes of it, red and green colour blindness are X-linked. So 1 in 12 males, which is about 8% of the population. And because if you're generally speaking female, you've got 2X, you got to get it from both parents. So it's very much lower. It's 1 in every 200 females have colour blindness of the red-green kind. Blue and yellow is much rarer and apparently is a totally different gene on a completely different chromosome. But that's getting into a whole lot of stuff that I don't know anything about. So
before we go on to that, we've got a comment from somebody. Stuart Black has said, hi Stuart, by the way, could Launch Tabletop make rescue kits of stickers for colourblind people that you could put on your meeples with polka dot stripes, zigzags? There is a company, and now I don't have them access to the name right now, but there is an accessible games company who are specifically done a lot of work with colourblind kits, and I've heard of that before where they've done upgrade kits for popular games, but I know there's a bit of an
aftermarket on eBay and Etsy and those sorts of places for those kinds of things. But yeah, I think rescue kits, I think that's a great way of putting it. So it's out of reach for this group of people and we can bring it back for them. So anyway, I took a photo with all of them there and then I went, right, Codeless, let's see what you've got. So here we have green weak. So they don't have complete green blindness, but everything just has a slightly weird grey tinge to it if you're normal sighted. When we go to the next slide though, suddenly you've got very little in the way of green anything. And I don't know if you remember which ones were red and green before, but I bet you can't tell which ones were red and green now.
Correct. When I was looking through this document before we went live on the show, I had the same thing. I had to go back and go, oh yeah, that's right. That was the one that was red and green.
And that's also why I put the normal one in every so often so people could go, oh, hang on, red and green. Yes. So, if you are green blind, suddenly red and green are very difficult to distinguish. So here we are back to normal. Remember where the red and the green sit because suddenly they're not as obviously different. Like they're still different. But if we are red blind, it's even worse. You can't tell anything about it. So designing for people who have colour blindness, and we have one today. Shannon was telling us just before that he has colour blindness, so we didn't know.
Is that what you said before? I must admit, I tuned out and I was trying to figure out another.
Sorry, I don't have colour blindness.
Oh, sorry.
I designed around the issue.
Right, my bad.
I feel a little bit. I felt a bit on blast when you put up those 4 colours because the 4 colours that I use for Lucidity and Runica are green, yellow, red, and blue. But because they were dice,
choose shades.
Yeah, there are ways that you can kind of get around it.
And that's exactly the thing. Yeah, it's when you encode information only using colour that you run into troubles. So
I did run into
shapes
an
and
issue with my
patterns.
green and my reds with lucidity. So with Runica, I changed one of the symbols that all of the dice shared, and so I changed it so that each of them would be their kind of unique symbol. So if I've brought a
Do
show
you
and
have
tell.
it there?
Yes,
I love
yes.
show and tell.
So, for instance, these two, someone with kind of red, it's okay. The shades work well enough that you can kind of tell, but I didn't want it to be so that players could only kind of tell. And so the kind of shared symbols that I made unique so that from looking at it from the table, anybody could tell what any of the dice were by looking for those unique symbols. And so it didn't, I wouldn't say it addressed the issue at its root cause, but what it did was offer a way around for players who
I also noticed there, though, that your choice of the shade of green particularly was a lot lighter than the one that's used by these manufacturers in the traditional, like, and I think that...
it is much more kind of a lighter...
Like a lime.
Is it kind of a more minty shade?
It is, yeah.
Now, we're just going to say, what plant do we want to associate it with the most? Yeah.
But what I found interesting was that by doing that, I ended up with an issue with my green and my yellow. So by changing the green, I then ran into issues with the yellow looking too similar to the green. And so by having the symbols on there, it completely avoided the issue.
Yeah.
And I think that's the... I was going to say, that's the advice that I think Kate was bringing up before, is that to have more than one way to tell whether it's a player color or whatever the grouping designation is. So it's not only the color, that's the thing that makes it different. Yeah.
Yeah. So using shapes or patterns, those sorts of things, to have another layer of encoding for that vital piece of information. If you're like, well, I can't tell the difference between these, I think that's mine, and you move another person's thing, either they're going to be really annoyed or ecstatic with what you've just done. So yeah.
I did a similar thing. Like I one of my games called Just Chocolate, which I did the graphic design for as well as the game design. I did this back in 2015/2016, and so I wasn't necessarily as knowledgeable as I am now, but I knew that it was a bit of an issue, and so I wasn't able to give each player color unique like patterning or anything. But what I did do was instead of, so it's 4 colors, but instead of the red, I went for a magenta. So the magenta, like pinky color, was quite, in those colorblind tests, it was quite distinct from the green, and that was that was my way of tackling it at that time. But I think the double coding is a way smarter way of doing it. And if you can,
so you could do things like, if you're doing a dice, engrave them with different shapes, or print on them, have custom printed dice. If you're using wooden components, you could sticker them with different things. Or if the game comes not with any of those sorts of things, you could really lo-fi it and get a Sharpie. If you were like, this is driving me really, just Sharpie it half a red, or put a dot on it or something that says all of these things go together. Put a dash on something. These things go together. It's, a bit hacky, but it will have the effect that you're looking for. So yeah, there's your launch table tip for the day.
Thank you very much, Kate, for that, and Shannon for also your contributions. And so we'll move on now to our sponsor. A word from our recurring sponsor, who is actually ourselves, as always, because that's the best sponsor for the show right now is us. And so please roll the tape. LaunchLab is our small batch print-on-demand service for tabletop games. Whether you want just 1 or 1,000, we have you covered. Select from our library of components to build your next game. We offer high-quality printing and components at a competitive price with fast production time, shipped to almost anywhere in the world. Go to launchtabletop.com to sign up for a free account and start prototyping now. Use the coupon code Materialise, that's MATERIALISE, at checkout to get 20% discount off your next order before shipping. All right, thank you for doing that, Kate. And there's our code. So yeah, if you haven't already tried out the system, then just you can create an account for free. It's all totally free to do that. And then when you do want to go make an order, that's the only time you have to enter in any kind of payment details or credit card details or anything like that. So check it out, and if you use the code Materialise, you'll get 20% off your next order. We just have, just before we totally
like a
move
bit of a
on.
shill there, but I definitely did just use that code about a month ago to get a prototype made.
Oh wow! Nice. Yeah, I haven't
nice
checked
to save that.
Yeah. Awesome. I haven't checked with anyone. Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah. The print quality was really, really good. I swear there's no gun just off screen sort of pointed at my head.
Well, I didn't even know. You surprised me. I had no idea you'd ordered it.
I had an inkling, but I'd forgotten because there was an issue with something in the rule book that Jason told me about, and I went, oh, so there's another copy coming out to you. Has it arrived yet?
Oh, well, no. Wouldn't that be amazing if my door knocked just then? But
it's on the way. I will follow up with Nick though to make sure.
I would pull it out to show it, but it's a Christmas present for someone. I don't want to accidentally.
I hope they like it. Let them know that things, coming.
And so just before we totally move on, though, we have had Cutlass Board Game send us a comment or a message saying having engraving with tactile options could also solve colorblind and blindness, which I think is sort of what you were talking about, Kate, particularly for the dice.
Yeah. So getting an engraved dice done is much more expensive because you've got to have molds done. Depends if you're using acrylic or resin. Resin dice are much cheaper per unit. I can't remember. I haven't looked at this stuff for a while. But if you're doing the uber fancy, lovely ones, they're much more expensive because you could get metal molds done and all horribly expensive.
Well, Shannon might know about some of these prices because you've done a few. Most of your games have got a bucket load of dice.
Mine may be a little bit out of date because it's been a few years since I've manufactured them. But from my experience, resin dice are a much cheaper mold cost, but a much higher per unit cost.
That's the thing. Yes, I knew there was something in there.
Acrylic is a very expensive mold cost, but really cheap per unit.
Yeah.
So if you're doing something like 80 dice in a game, then acrylic is your way to go. But if you're doing like 1 or 2 custom dice for your game, which is pretty standard, I suppose, then resin's a really good way to go.
Have you done dice, Alan, with any of the games that you released?
Yes. Yeah. We did Smiths of Winterforge that had dice.
That's right.
Did Hands of Fate have
Hand of Fate, yeah, we also have dice, but those are screen printed dice, not molded ones.
Okay.
Yeah. Makes it a bit easier.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll move on to the main.
I feel like dealing with blindness versus color. Sorry to avoid the main issue. But I feel like dealing with blindness versus just color blindness is a whole separate thing that I wouldn't even feel confident to tackle myself. There's just so much involved in it.
And similar to what I was saying before, I've definitely heard of a company, but I just cannot remember their name right now, where they were making sleeves that you could have Braille embossed on the sleeve, so that blind players, like everyone, have the same sleeves, but then the blind player can feel what card they've got, and it's pretty pretty amazing stuff to do. But obviously, it's a huge investment for any kind of company to try and make it. I don't know how they were doing it, but it's definitely been a thing people have tried to tackle. Yeah. But it is definitely one of those character. It just highlights how much of the hobby or the industry is reliant on people having sight. That's kind of an assumption that we make about most of our games. And obviously there's always exceptions, and there's many, I guess, more. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like party games, which you can do almost completely verbally, or you don't necessarily require seeing anything. But still, even then, a lot of them might have a card or a prompt or something like that you have to read. So. Yeah.
Or a rule book.
True. Rule books, I guess we have come a long way, because a lot of people are releasing video rule books or paying for somebody to make a video kind of rule book. So I think that is a problem that it exists, but it's something that people are trying to work on, because it not just helps people with vision issues, it helps heaps of people have another way to learn rules, and it's a net positive, I think, overall, if you can do it. So. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on and move into the main topic for the episode, which is about being a solo publisher. So, as in, you are a single person, but you're also a publisher, and you're doing it all. So, Shannon, you've been doing this for a few years now, and according to your own website, you released Lucidity, I think, in 2017. And Lucidity, is that your first published game? I actually don't even know.
Yeah, it was my first published one. So I went to Kickstarter fresh with no experience at all of. I mean, obviously, I had the experience of the medium and did a lot of research beforehand, but there are some things that you can't learn until you kind of do them, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and Kickstarter, you definitely have to live it to go, oh, that's what it's like.
Yeah, which is also nice because I think those were it was the golden era of Kickstarter.
Yeah, those were the days of the 30-day campaign, which, you know, when we did Unfair, that was 30 days and there were 3 of us on it. If it was just you doing 30 days for Lucidity, I can't even imagine the eyes on stalks and the zombie, like, you know, at the end of it.
It's interesting how much you can rely on your backers in those instances, that you get one or two kind of very invested backers who kind of look after the Q&As for you when you're asleep. And I would quite often post in the comments section, all right, everyone, I'm off to sleep now. And then people from America would kind of jump in and answer any questions that pop up. Yeah, or would say, I'm sure he'll be back in a few hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it seems like I've never run a Kickstarter myself, but I've obviously was a part of the Rule and Make team for a bit, just as a designer. But I could see when they were running some of their campaigns, and I've talked to many people. It does feel like 15 days seems to be pretty common these days for campaigns now.
15 or 17 seems to be.
Wow. Yeah. Even when I did Runica, 21 days was the standard.
When was
really
Runica
coming down?
When did you do that one?
We got it to backers just before COVID hit, if that gives an idea of timing. So maybe 2019.
So 2019. Yeah, 19,
yeah, it's in the last couple of years that people have gone, no, actually, that's enough. Just because in the middle of it, when there's that really long lull and you're just pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and it just doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that is accounting. Sorry, I keep jumping in, Eris. I wonder how much of that is the sway of Kickstarter from kind of independent studios and first timers to big sort of studios like Simon and the kind of GameFound. Lucky Duck does a lot of stuff through them, and the sort of big studios that have the marketing push before the Kickstarter and don't really rely on the campaign to push interest.
I know, Alan, you ran originally 30-day campaigns for a few of the original ones back in the day, but then I believe there was it a 7-day or 15-day campaign that was done for the second edition of Entropy, the rework.
Yeah, all of the campaign was 30 days with exception to Entropy's second edition.
Yeah.
But that was not really our choice because that was part of the Make 100 event.
That's right.
That
Kickstarter was doing a thing, weren't they? Yeah.
So
I wonder.
No, it was all 30 days. That was the standard practice when we were running it. Yeah.
I wonder how much, like what you said, Shannon, is it, and I wonder how much, like, because I've not done any kind of look into this, but are the 15-day campaigns and all the 17-day campaigns a tabletop game phenomena, or is that happening? Because I mean, I back some other Kickstarters for like technology, like gadgets and gizmos and things, and I feel like they're still often 30 days. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just haven't looked at the dates properly. Like, I wonder how much of it is a whole, crowdfunding thing that they're pushing towards smaller campaigns, or if it is more contained to the tabletop space. Yeah, I don't know.
I haven't looked. I don't do other things on Kickstarter. I only look at tabletop games.
I can't. I'm not going to name any names or anything, but I do know at least one person who works at Kickstarter. So I will, in the future, I will definitely try and we'll get someone on who can talk about it, even if it's not that person. But I think it would be interesting to have someone who's maybe
has more insight.
Yeah, closer to it right now. Or even actually, we've got Dan and Brenner who have done a lot of stuff with Quill and they've done a lot of work with helping companies do Kickstarters very recently and had a lot of success with it. So maybe we'll get one of them on. Maybe.
Yeah,
that'd be good. Yeah. So Shannon, to bring it back to you a little bit, what was there something that you wish you had known before you started, like before you did Lucidity, before you became a publisher yourself, a solo publisher? Was there something that you think, if I'd just known that, it would have made life a lot easier?
I think we were talking about, just for the viewers before the show, about the tax implications of Kickstarter and things like that. I don't want to go into it because it's super, super boring. But I guess the one thing that I would say is get a good accountant who knows what they're doing in terms of, if you plan to have your funding in 1 year, but your expenses in another financial year, that they know what they're doing, because otherwise you can get really stung by it. And I was for my first campaign, and then I kept it in mind for the second one. And we were fine with it. But
because obviously that could radically affect. Because if people are running campaigns where their funding is really tight, like they maybe didn't quite get, like they were expecting to overfund and they didn't quite get there, or whatever. If you've had an unexpected something happen, where you're not keeping all the money that you think you're keeping, that could radically affect actually getting the game made, right? Like, because then you might not have enough money to pay the printers or whatever. Yeah. So I think, I know I've also heard people mention, and again, this isn't a Kickstarting guide episode, but I've heard people mention even things like just being aware of the fees that Kickstarter takes and all that kind of stuff that some people don't necessarily take into account when they're first running it, and how to factor that in.
I was given advice to give yourself a 10% buffer for credit card and Kickstarter fees, and then give yourself another 10% buffer on top of that, just in case. And thankfully for that 10% extra there, that made sure that I never really struggled with paying manufacturers or anything like that. But what that extra buffer did was took the stress out of the situation. So I never was worried that I wouldn't be able to get it to backers.
The other issue is us being in Australia, and we have Australian Kickstarter accounts. We are receiving funds, well, at least in Willem's situation, it was in Australian dollars. So in the first couple of campaigns that we ran, the Australian currency dipped real significantly between the time that it was funded until the time that we went to manufacturing. So we learnt our lesson, and we actually went and got in the USD account with Westpac, so that as soon as the money came in, we immediately made sure we transferred it into converted into USD, so we can keep that. Yeah. We got stung a couple of times because of it.
I did exactly the same thing, Alan. I had a Great British Pound and a US dollar one, and of course Lucidity was before Brexit, so the British Pound one was for all of my distribution over into Europe, and I think for Runica I went with German, but they accepted US dollars, so it's just useful to have.
So that ties into a question I was going to ask, which was, you're obviously, we've established now multiple times, I've said the fact that you're a solo publisher, but obviously to get things done, you probably need to partner with different people. So you're working, I'm assuming, with some kind of partners in these other regions to get the games out there? Like, are you working with distributors, or how do you do that?
Yeah. So I guess saying maybe flying solo is a little bit
it's clickbait,
misleading on my part, maybe. Yeah, absolutely. But
no, I made up the title. Hey, I'm happy to own this one. I made up the title. I just said, hey, Shannon, what about this?
And I know that there are some developers out there that are doing the publishing, the graphic design, the game design, the art, everything kind of by themselves. Ratcatcher is one off the top of my head where all
Matthew
of the
Aslan,
art and design.
Yep.
I think just incredible creature that he is. I don't know how he managed to do all of that.
Matt is amazing. I would definitely be chasing him down to get on an episode. He's a I've known him for a long time, and he's really good. And Ratcatcher, I haven't unfortunately played my copy, but I absolutely did back it. But I know it's been received really well, and he's done so much good work with that. But the other person who I think does pretty much everything themselves is it Ryan Lucrat or Lucrat, did Above and Below, the game Above
Ryan Lucrat, yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't he do the whole thing? I thought he did everything himself as well.
Yeah. Is it Red Raven Games? Is that him?
Yeah,
yes,
I remember reading a post from him saying this game wouldn't have been made if I hadn't had the flu and I was stuck at home, and I just started doing all the art for it and design for it, and within like a week of having the flu, he designed and arted an entire game, and that's
amazing.
A skill. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I'm like, watch TV while I've got the flu, screw everything else.
So I think that kind of comes to, the biggest thing about being solo is that you have to hire the people that you need, and you have to kind of identify and be prepared to make those financial and time considerations for yourself, for your insanity and for your bank accounts, to figure out what you do and don't need. When I did my games, I could have very easily gone and done I could have gone and done a graphic design course and illustration courses on one of the many sort of courses you can do online, and kind of get myself up to good enough. But why do that when you can pay someone whose entire job is to do that? And they'll do it.
As a working graphic designer, I really appreciate hearing those words.
Well, even just when I sent my first sort of concept to a graphic designer for Lucidity, and they came back, and I just went, all right, yep. I didn't even know that there was something wrong with it until this was Stephanie Gustafsson, until she sent back examples. Yeah.
So who did you use? Who did you end up using for that?
Yeah, so that was Stephanie Gustafsson. So she's
fantastic.
Yes, she did Aeon's End, which is what drew me to her. And
and she's doing quite a lot of work with Matt Paquette now, I think.
Okay. Yeah, great. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think though, like it's important to recognize what you said though, like because some people they will go, oh, it is better for me to learn the skills and do it myself than to, outsource it. And I think you're right. You've got to make that choice. Every person's got to make that choice about what are the things that they outsource and what they don't. But you've already answered one of my forthcoming questions, which was, do you work with contractors and freelancers, and do you outsource stuff? And you just said that you did. So, do you
actually
find
talking
that,
about talking about Stephanie has just made me think of something that I didn't really consider before Kate raised. That, of course, she's working with really big publishers, and here I come, this person who's never done this before, which is that if you are doing it all yourself for the first time, that your contractors kind of have to be okay with the fact that you won't know what to do. And in a lot of cases, they're kind of hand-holding you along the way. So you may end up paying a little bit more because you need more revisions. You need to have meetings with them.
Also why you hire someone for their expertise. It's not just for them to push pixels. And I think that's a really important thing that we do need to talk about more in the industry. The publishers who do occasionally treat specialist, designers and illustrators and people like that as if they're pixel monkeys and they're just, pushing pixels around. That's not okay. Either you trust them to do the work and you're not going to micromanage them. So, you get an expert and you let them do the work. You let them do the thing that they're really specialized in. And it's okay. I'm not saying that it's not okay to say no. It's absolutely okay to go, not crazy about that. Let's rethink it. But yeah, they're specialists for a reason.
And also the other point is that you don't have to use anything that they do. Like I might hire someone to do illustration work, but I may not actually like the results. I'm still going to pay them, and I'm still going to get the work. But I might go, actually, this hasn't really panned out how I planned. How do I do I hire somebody else? Do I do it? I remember there's a graphic designer who is long dead now, named Paul Rand, and he's pretty famous in the graphic design world, and he did a lot of stuff. And one of the quotes that's kind of funny was when Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, he went and started a computer company called Next Computers, and he got Paul Rand to do the identity. And Paul Rand by this stage was already older and well established in the industry. And so Steve, apparently the interview with Steve was he went and said, can you do the logo for us and stuff, and like give us options or whatever? And Paul Rand's like, no, you give me the problem, which is make your logo. I'll do my solution. You pay me, and then you do what you want with it. And it was like very transactional, and it was a really good way for me. It was refreshing to kind of go, yeah, okay. If you're paying someone for the work, you're not beholden to use it. Like obviously, you may need to manage the finances, but like in terms of like any kind of moral obligation, that person's been paid for the work. It's all okay, and if you just want to move on and try something else, do that.
Yeah, as long as no one's getting screwed.
Exactly, I think, and that's it. Pay the invoices and treat people fairly. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bit of a balancing act as well, because in the case of you get work that you don't really think that you can use as a small publisher, you usually have a very tight kind of finance. Often you're paying for it out of pocket, you're kind of saving up money and paying for it as you go from your day job.
No guaranteed return as well, because if you can't fund it, or a publisher doesn't pick it up if you are shopping it around.
So
Shannon, so what do you
cost. Well, I wouldn't say pay for the best, because often you can't afford it if you're doing it. As you are.
I was going to say
the best can run you tens of thousands of dollars, but also don't pay for the cheapest that you can get from Fiverr or from a friend of a friend whose friend is going to photography school or something like that, because you might not be happy with what you're given, and then you may feel a moral obligation to use it.
And that also goes the other way. If you're the artist or designer, like I've had situations where friends of friends have been referred to me and I've helped them out, and then they've just ghosted me, never paid, never done anything. And so I think it can go both ways, and I think that's important to have that relationship. But what I was going to ask was, like, when you are managing the budget, managing the stuff, do you have any specific strategies for, okay, how do we make sure the art or graphic design is going in the right direction and we're not going off track in a way that's going to be costly later on? Do you have any things that you've done before or lessons that you've learnt to help with that?
I think any artist that you hire should be trying to get either sketches or a sense, at least for the first few images that they're doing. I'd say for every one of them to get a couple of very quick sketch outs so that you're both on board with it. And often you'll see in those, they might send you 3, and one of them they've obviously put more effort into, and you might think, okay, this is the one you're passionate about, you go ahead with this because your passion will sort of shine through. But sometimes you'll kind of look at the 3 and go, none of those,
right.
You've completely misunderstood what I was looking for. And if they've gone ahead and they've done 15 hours of work into something that they expect to get paid for, and then you look at the finished product and you go, no, I meant, lime, like he has lime skin. He doesn't have like a lime for a head. Like, what have you done? What do you do in that situation? Someone isn't going to get paid or isn't going to be happy. So it's good to be in touch with someone the whole way through.
You remind me of something that I think we learned, I think a couple of projects down the line with regards to hiring artists. Because one of the typical things that you do is you, as a creative director, you always go and hunt for sort of really good artists. So you go to art stations and other places to sort of just see what's out there. But what we found is that looking at someone's portfolio is not exactly an indication. It's an indication of their skills, but it's not an indication of true cost. But because what you can't see is how many hours has been put into certain pieces that they've done in their portfolio. So early on, we had this a concept artist that was doing something for a movie studio, and his rates were like, oh, actually, his rates is really competitive. He's from Bulgaria. The rates are really in our favor, and his art, it looks amazing. And the problem is that you look at the rate and you look at his output, but what you don't know is that it's taken him like a month to do that one piece. So it ends up costing, way more than, so kind of speed is really important. And so that's one of the things that we start to look at more, is not just the artist's sort of technical capabilities, but also how they can manage time based on maximum impact. When I say maximum impact is with graphic designers and artists who are more aware of our medium, they know, like, for example, the foreground characters you need to put more effort into. And then as you sort of gradually go to the background, you can just sort of kind of do some quick sort of abstract, blurry pieces that only take you half an hour to do, and it'll still just look as good. Or the medium, right? Small card, you don't have to put as much detail into it. So those things actually end up becoming much more valuable as we started to look for artists, as opposed to just looking at the portfolio and go, yeah, that's the art that we want to achieve, because you never know how much that's actually going to cost you.
And I think also, like, one tactic I've done is get test pieces done. Like, I'll just say, look, can we just do one? Like, I'll create a brief for a single, like, piece of art, and just kind of use it as a benchmark to kind of go, how long will this take? Or I'll just, and not every artist can give you this information, but, like, I'll just say, okay, like, I've seen these pieces in your portfolio. How long did it take you to, like, how many hours was that? And just to give me an idea about what to expect. So, yeah,
so that both
there's a lot of
sides
ways.
are happy as well, because they might look at it and think, oh, like, this is actually way more work than I thought it would be. Maybe this isn't the project for me.
Yeah. And I think that's also a good point, is as a publisher, having an idea about what are you actually asking them to do, what is your list of deliverables or requirements that you're giving them, and having an idea about that before you go into it makes a huge impact. Yeah. So we've answered a few questions. One kind of, I guess, slightly fun one, but at the same time serious one. If you could hire somebody to add to your company and be in your business, what would you hire them to do? What's the key thing you think you'd like to hire someone to do for you?
I mean, it's probably social media marketing, and it's something that I've never hired anyone to do, because it just felt like such a risk to pay money when I wasn't sure how much money investment I was going to get back from that. But looking back on it, probably the second Kickstarter that I ran, Runica, would have really benefited.
Thank you, Dan.
See, Dan, if you get everyone to... You're basically a publisher if you're just hiring someone to do everything for you. Or a CEO, I suppose, at that point, if you're hiring someone to publish for you too. But yeah, I think that it's a risk. Every time you hire somebody else who you don't know personally, who you have to put your own money on the table for, it's a risk. And that's why it's so great to have a team. And so, with Runica, I went back to Stephanie to do the graphic design again, and I went back to my same publishers, not publishers, my same manufacturers, which was Long Pack Games, because I knew them, I trusted them, I knew that the work that they did would be good.
Hey, we're having all the people that we've mentioned. I don't know if they were listening earlier, but hi, Dan and Matt. We've been talking about you both in this episode already.
So that's the magic trick, right? We say that, we do a name drop, and then they show up.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say as well, if there was one... So I was going to say,
we've got 6 people watching us at the moment.
We do. I think this is our record, yeah.
It's amazing.
Sorry, Shannon, you were saying...
We yeah, no, we have summoned you, Matthew.
Beetlejuice, yeah.
I was going to say, if there was one person that I would hire, then I would love to work with them. I'm going to get the name wrong, but Kwanchai Moria, who does the most incredible art. And I often wonder, looking at the stuff that they do, what do the sketches even look like?
Yeah.
Because it is so blended and so conceptual, but at a high level.
What was the game last year, and I think it went to Kickstarter, where they had a bunch of different artists and they were all really different styles. So I'm just randomly flicking cable. And they had, all different styles in their artists, and they put together a cohesive game with this art from all of these different artists. I can't think what it was.
No.
Come on, we've got 6 people in the
Chat,
audience.
chat. If you can,
This is where we need the chat. So while the chat's working on that, so Shannon, how do you balance your time between being a game designer, like actually making games and designing games, and running a business as a publisher?
Yeah, I guess you do a lot of it in your spare time. You kind of do a lot of lunch breaks and kind of before work and after work.
And during work.
Kickstarters. And, well,
just don't.
Only 6 people watching this, so
yeah, that's right. This is on the internet forever. Be careful what you say.
Shannon never does anything at work except work.
But during the last Kickstarters, I would, on my bathroom breaks, answer backers' queries and things like that. So I had to take a day off at the start and a day off at the end just to kind of deal with the enormity of it, which also it was quite funny working a day job that only a few people knew that I was running a Kickstarter. It felt like this weird secret that I was keeping from everybody, that this huge thing was going on, but there I was just doing my normal daily routine.
Yeah. So what percentage, like, of the actual being, like, running Foxtail Games, would you estimate how much is spent on running the business and how much is spent on, actually designing games?
Percentages, it's hard to say. I would say that because I am more of a creatively inspired rather than a person who kind of works to schedules, then it really depends on what I'm passionate about at the time. So if I have a game that I'm really excited about that I'm designing, that takes my attention away from the business side of things, then I probably will let the business slide. Eris, as you mentioned, I haven't updated my website in a year. And,
hey, that was before we recorded, so no one knew. You didn't even need to say that.
Just as an example, though, if it's something like a Kickstarter coming up and I'm trying to change my focus to drawing attention to a new game or something like that, then I might be updating my website and social medias more regularly. But I guess you can't do everything all the time. You have to kind of put your focus into what is important at the time. And on that note, that's why I enjoy the tabletop game designer meetups so much, because it forces me to get a project that I've been kind of putting on the back burner for so long and actually do something with it, because people are expecting me to have something for an event.
Do you ever
say
go
more things
along...
about prototyping and how Launch Tabletop helps?
something mission statement.
I've already showed for you guys earlier today.
I was going to say Shannon's already gone above and beyond, that's beyond what more than even you. So do you go to? Because I've lived in Sydney now for a little bit, and I've only been to one of the playtesting events, but I think they kind of COVID mucked everything up. Do you ever go to any of those playtest meetups with any other designers or anything?
Beforehand I was probably going weekly, beforehand, being before the end times. Then I was probably going weekly. But since then everything's kind of shifted around. It feels weird to go to big gatherings.
Because the one I know of is only monthly now.
Yeah. There was a really good one kind of out near where I used to live, and of course I've moved away from that location now, and it's harder to get to these things, which means that instead of kind of doing little iterations every week, which really is what I did with Lucidity, is bring it every week with slight variations and just test with people until they were sick of playing it. Now I kind of have to focus on really big things and do most of the playtesting myself.
So we're getting close to our hour mark. In fact, we're pretty much at the hour mark, but I feel like if it's okay with everyone, we might go for a slightly over, because I've still got a few more questions I want to ask you, Shannon. One of the ones that is, I think, could be interesting for a lot of people who are, wanting to grow their business. You managed to have Lucidity distributed, or I don't know, co-published by 2 different publishers or was picked up by them after you did the Kickstarter? And so you had one in the US and I think one was, you said, in Brazil.
Yep. So Renegade Games picked it up in the States, and they initially did a print run of pretty much equivalent to my US backers. And so they kind of co-published. They did all the distribution and stuff to the American game stores. And luckily, they also managed to do a really, really nice deal with Barnes & Noble in the States, which...
I was going to say, I have a recollection that it went into mass market, which is outstanding.
Incredible.
I just shared a photo today with Shannon that I found as another totally different game publisher who I follow on Facebook. They shared a photo of a shelf of games, and on it was Lucidity. And so I sent it to Shannon. I was like, "Hey, this is in Barnes and Noble. Hey, just right today, I've just seen your game on the shelf. It's amazing."
Yeah, I went to visit my my then girlfriend, now wife, in Portland, and I remember walking into a Powell's bookstore, and there it was on the shelf, and just thinking,
that's so cool.
Do you think they'd mind or be angry if I secretly signed these?
Some random they probably walking in.
They'd be like, "Why is someone vandalizing?" And then all this stock gets discounted and thrown away because someone's vandalized. So yeah, amazing.
So how many copies are out there in the wild now for Lucidity with all of those avenues?
So probably through multiple very small reprints, I'd say there's probably somewhere between 20 to 30,000.
That's fantastic.
That's
really, really
that's
good.
Wonderful.
Yeah, for a kind of first time game.
Yeah,
it's really, really good. Yeah.
And so that just ties into a question I meant to ask earlier was, what do you expect to be if you are going to try and do a new game? Do you have in your mind a print run size that you're going to aim for, that you you want to hit, or do you kind of just not worry about that, or
Yeah, I guess it depends on the game. If it were it depends on whether, because if it's a really, really big game with a lot of components and things like that, then you really need a much bigger print run to make it economical, to even make it worth doing, which is really difficult. And, I had those 5-10 year plans when I started out, and I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Lucidity. It's a small game that's kind of low price point. I'll move on to something bigger with Runica, grow my audience, and then I'll kind of build on from there, slowly build up an audience and be able to tackle those really large projects afterwards. I mean, a few things have happened in the world since then that have kind of put a bit of a slow on those. But also, interestingly, what you were saying before about running a company and designing games is really hard to do both of those things at once. So I really pushed myself to get Runica out there, and I'm pretty sure that I burnt myself out doing it. So by the time that got to backers, I was just done with game design, and I don't think I touched anything seriously for a few years after that. And I've only recently gotten back into designing things as more than just a couple of scribbles in a notebook. So it's tough doing it on your own while you also have a full-time job to keep that momentum build.
And I guess the truth is that for most people doing this, we do have day jobs as well as making games. That's just the way it is. Yeah.
But I guess a lot of people who are designing the game by themselves, for a lot of them, they have one game that they really love, that they've designed, they've put years into, and that game comes out or is, printed sort of privately, whether it's through something like LTT or whether they do kind of a full Kickstarter plus print run plus everything like that, and then go to mass market and, gold rains down from the heavens on them. For some people, that's enough. And they're very happy to say, my game is out there and I'm done. I'm moving on to something else, which is perfectly fine. And I think a lot of solo designers would be like that.
What's your secret number?
Sorry.
Do you have a number of print games that you want to make and you'll be done? Or is this yeah, what where do you sit in that spectrum of one and done to I want to be the ongoing publisher and this will be my career
I want to
going
be Reiner
forward?
Knizia with 500 games or 300 games, whatever it
Yeah,
is that he's got to his name.
I mean, I wouldn't even say that. I think there was a time after, or maybe just before Runica happened, that I could have committed myself full time, throw everything in on this, and see what would happen, and really take that risk. And I didn't want to, and I'm kind of okay with that. It's one of those sliding doors things. I think someone with a lot more courage and in that respect anyway, Kim Brebeck, who just threw himself completely into game publishing, has done really well as a result of that, but by the same token it could have gone the opposite way. And so I mean, I have kind of maybe one or two other games I'd like to produce. I have that sort of magnum opus game in the back of my mind that's like, that Gloomhaven sized kind of scale game
extravaganza.
that I kind of know that chances are I will never make it, but I would like to try anyway. But
sounds like fun.
Yeah, and if it doesn't pan out, then it's not a huge sort of loss.
You can always start small scale, and I recommend a company called Launch Tabletop. It has a small scale production.
Making a single copy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but that I was going to
shameless.
To put a serious spin on that, though, I do think we are entering a time where these niche projects with very small audiences are definitely more possible. Like, obviously, Launch Tabletop is trying to solve that problem. There are other companies also trying to solve that problem. So I think, and also even just more broadly in the world, we have 3D printers and we have all these other technologies around that are supporting boutique niche, small production run stuff at still a not totally insane cost, price point. So I think it is definitely the type of thing where, people have that option. It's just tricky when you want to make it a business, right? Like if you want to be profitable, well, that's when it's like, okay, maybe my art project or my passion project is, I need to rethink how I do it. But as in terms of just actually making the thing, I think it's better than it was 20 years ago when a lot of these things didn't exist.
People, there's something that was shared on social media maybe last year that someone was talking about. We need to kind of redefine what success and failure is. That when we say business has closed down, it's not because it's a failure necessarily. I mean, maybe it's gone bankrupt, but maybe also the business has set out and achieved exactly what it meant to do. And so for some people, they will build up a business too. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say I agree entirely. Maybe it was only intended to sustain those people through their working life, and now they've retired, so they're done.
And even if it doesn't end in that prettier way, I think there's also a lesson I'm learning in my own life and applying it to things, but thinking of things as normal life cycle or seasonal things. Like this is a season for things and seasons change, and that's okay. And life and death happens and these things go on. And so I think my sister runs a small business, and we've talked a few times about what it would mean and for her to not do it anymore or whatever. And she's got a really good attitude of just whenever it's time to pull the plug, she'll pull the plug and she'll just move on to the next thing, because it's not, she doesn't see it as a failure, even if it is because of financial reasons that she closed it down, which I'm not saying it, she's doing okay, but it was just more her attitude is really positive about, this is just a seasonal thing. I'm just doing this for now, and then I don't know what the future's going to hold. And I think that's a good mindset, and yeah. So one more question from me, and then I'll throw it over to Kate and to Alan for your final question. Let me see, what have I not asked? I think I've asked
just about everything.
Yeah, I was going to say I've asked pretty much everything. So maybe I don't need to ask anything. Do either Kate or Alan have anything else you want to ask Shannon?
Have you got anything coming up aside from this little Christmas present?
Not for a while. I think I took something to PAX Australia to test out, and that went really well. Nice. Which is always nice when you take something and you don't sort of think, oh, this is
this is terrible.
But to come away from something like that and think, oh, okay, this is worth pursuing. That's great.
That's fantastic.
Compared to, I think a couple of years ago, I was about to push the button on really progressing through this conspiracy theory board game, and then Trump got elected and it wasn't funny anymore. So things like that, maybe that'll sit in the back shelf for 10 years, and when people have kind of forgotten, hopefully, then I can pull that out and maybe tragedy plus time.
But it is funny because culturally we had like the X-Files and all that, and like conspiracy stuff was like a big. There was a genuine thing where it was kind of a fun hobby to kind of like look into and talk about. And you're right, like the last 5 years is.
There was a moment where we were making fun of people for lizard sort of lizards
and now there
taking over government.
A bunch of people who genuinely think that the Earth is flat and the moon landings were faked, and
there's a Netflix series called Inside Job. Have any of you seen it?
No.
It's a cartoon animated series, like more like that kind of adult animation, not sexy, but like whatever, not kid. But the premise is this whole conspiracy thing. Lizard people taking, like, it's basically taking all of those things and putting it into a comedy cartoon. I've watched about 4 or 5 episodes, and I quite enjoy. It surprised me how much I enjoyed, because I was expecting to be really cringe and like, oh no, this is going to be terrible. But I think they've actually found a way to kind of take that narrative and make fun with it. Like, and so I think what I'm trying to say is, I think there's hope. I think there's hope that we'll be able to have fun with this concept again. And so one question I did forget to ask, which I will ask as my final question, then Alan, I'll get you to do something if you want to, is would you ever crowdfund future games, do you think, or are you kind of done with that as a I
don't know
method?
So much if I'm done with crowdfunding. I wonder if maybe the tide's gone back out to sea on crowdfunding. I think for a time it was really, really good for independent creators, that people thought, this is a well of ideas, you're getting all this crazy sort of stuff, but the creators are still very small, so I get a very intimate relationship with the person who's creating this thing. And I think the expectations maybe of purchasers and customers now is that customer rather than supporter side of things, and possibly that's because a lot of big companies are using it, like pre-order systems, because it is set up for exactly that and works really well for it. So I do wonder whether the time for big successes coming out of Kickstarter and GameFound is past. But certainly if I ever went with another project again, I'd probably try pitching to a few publishers, and then if that didn't work, then I probably would go to crowdfunding.
So how would
just
that...
to see if I'm wrong.
Yeah. How would that work for you though? So does that mean that you'd pitch them as Shannon Kelly, the designer, not as Foxtail Games, the publisher?
Well, I think you see a lot of
not thought through. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you see a lot of design studios out there that you'll see the logo around, but they're behind a bigger publisher. So Renegade Games does a lot where they take publishing studios and then they package them up nicely, and they have all of the distributors as contacts, and they know how to market a game. And they have people, if I wanted to take Lucidity to the States myself, to Gen Con, for instance, then the cost is massive, not just in the $5,000 of plane flights, plus getting all the stock over there, plus things like that. They have people who go to the conventions for you, which is such a benefit. I think you can still be an independent designer, but sit behind a studio so that you look bigger than you actually are. And so you can kind of punch above your weight in terms of international spheres and people looking at your game and thinking, "Oh, this is it has 2 logos on it. It must be good."
Awesome. All right, Alan, was there anything you wanted just to raise, or Kate?
A quick question. Very easy to answer, so you won't take you much. If there is a tool that you can have, an imaginary tool, as a designer / publisher, what would that tool ideally solve for you? I wish I have this tool that can just very easily eliminate something annoying in your life, as part of the work that you do? Is there one tool that you
So
think it's going to go?
think like a magic wand, we can wave it and poof, this problem's gone.
Yeah,
Okay.
a magic tool. I would love a chess clock that whenever you tapped the thing, you would forget everything from your other standpoint, so that you could play a game against yourself without knowing the information that should be hidden from the other player.
That'd be great.
So it's sort of playtesting. Yeah, playtesting.
So really, you're looking for an AI, someone to write an AI to playtest your game.
Yeah, I mean, look, a magic mirror that creates a second copy of myself to play games against.
Oh, now you want a cloning
to play
machine.
test with would be great as well. Okay. But no, cloning machines get out of. We've all learned by now. Cloning machines get out of hand.
Where can people find you online?
So, as I mentioned, my website is not very updated, but as a result, you can join my mailing list on foxtailgames.com. And I probably haven't sent a mail out in about 2 years, so I promise you will not be spammed by it.
I was going to say, you're not going to spam people then, are you? Yeah.
So if you're interested in the sort of projects that I'm doing and you want an update on that, then I post irregularly and only when it's very important. And then I'm also on social media at Foxtail Games, doing various things at my whims. My Instagram is full of weird design things. My TikTok is full of all of my dice making videos.
Dice making videos.
I was gonna say we didn't even talk about any of that stuff. So we say this to almost every single person we have on the show, but like I think we're gonna have to book you in for another episode next year.
Next year,
because there's just more to talk about. Well, certainly. Okay, so January, whatever, we'll have you in 2 weeks' time. But like, next year we'll have you on, and we can talk about some of these other things that we didn't even mention. Yeah, talk about that stuff. That's really cool.
Do like a 12-month recap. So all that stuff you said you were going to do. Did you actually end up sending out a newsletter? Well, have you updated your website?
I didn't know this till
very depressing.
I didn't know this till recently, but you know, Billie Eilish, the singer, she has done for the last, I think, 5 or 6 years the exact same interview, like literally the same questions with like Vogue or one of the magazines as a video, like then on the YouTube channel. And so the last one was just her watching her like each of herself from the last years answer these questions and just that growth, because obviously she was really young when she sort of became really famous. And it's a really interesting idea to have people back, in that annually and just kind of talk about what's happened. And cool. All right. Well, thank you all very much. As always, thank you, Kate, for joining me here. It's much appreciated.
Welcome.
And thank you, Alan, for joining us again, our very regular special guest.
All good.
And you see him again in my script. I've got you as Alan Chang, but it's no longer relevant. It's just, things have changed. Times have changed. And thank you very much, Shannon Kelly, for joining us and helping us just learn more about what your experiences are making games and have been making games. Really illuminating.
Thanks for having me. I keep saying it, and I've said for the last 5 years now, but it's weird being asked onto shows as an expert, because I still remember when I knew absolutely nothing, and I would have felt very weird being on a show like this. But I'm glad that I've learned something over the last 5 years, and hopefully it can help.
Yeah, and not just that, but you've got successes. Like you've had games that have been published and have done well, and I think, and I know that's all relative. Like success is a relative term, and it all means different things to different people. But from my perspective, I think anyone that gets a game to market, that's a success. Like just getting the thing done, getting it printed, getting it into customers' hands, like that's amazing. So well done. All right. Well, so I'm not sure if we will be on the air next week. I don't know. It's the end of the year, and I haven't made my mind up if I'm going to do an episode or not. That's the truth of it right now. So,
go crazy. Go to the movies. Live large.
I might go to the movies. You never know. But keep an eye. If you subscribe to our Facebook or our YouTube, which both of these is streaming on both right now, then you can see whenever we have another episode coming up. You can follow us on or join us on at Discord, which is ltt.ltd/s/discord, and there you can talk to us both about any kind of production related questions to do with Launch Tabletop or just making games in general, but also any other kind of game design or tabletop related things. We're very interested in talking about that stuff and hearing what you have to say. Also, it's a good place to put if you've got questions or if you want us to try and get people onto the show or anything like that that we can maybe try and do, then that's the place to kind of ask those questions. We also have our help, or just email us. So if you wanted to email us, you can email us at support@launchtabletop.com. Exactly the same things as the Discord if you have any questions. Just a reminder that if you go to launchtabletop.com, sign up for Launch Lab, you can then go to app.launchtabletop.com and you can use that code Materialise to get 20% off your next order. That's before shipping, doesn't include shipping. You need to make sure you tell people that so everyone knows what they're getting in for. And I think that's everything. So I'm Eris, and I've been your host, and this has been Materialise, the Launch Tabletop podcast. This is produced by Launch Tabletop, believe it or not. And I've just said you can visit our website, so all that's done. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to play our outro video, and then we're going to have our world-famous questionnaire with Shannon. And so, yeah, hang around if you want to watch that. If not, see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Alrighty, we are back. And this time we've got the questionnaire, which I have not got graphic presented. Oh no, quickly get the graphic done. It's very important to have this graphic because I'm so proud of it. So welcome to the Materialise questionnaire. Shannon, we will be asking you 5 very important questions which will define our view of you forevermore. So
will you be telling me my horoscopes afterwards? As a result,
no. We'll just be judging you. That's all.
We're going to be judging you.
Okay.
So, question 1: are you more of a heart, a diamond, a club, or a spade?
I am more of a heart because I do things by passion and by what I am inspired by at any given moment.
That's awesome. I relate to that. Dinosaurs who are pirates or robots who are ghosts?
I love the idea of dinosaurs who steal things from other dinosaurs. That sounds much better than robots who've given up the ghost.
Has anyone actually
that's what I said last
ghost option yet?
Dinosaurs are already pirates. Like, just by virtue of them being dinosaurs, they take food from other people or eat them.
I think one person, Kate, did pick the robot ghost, possibly. I think maybe last week or the week before.
I did. Yeah, last week I did Robot Ghost because I was channeling Ghost in the Shell as an anime.
Yeah, I think the robots who are ghosts are, I mean, if you really delve into the philosophy of it, it's probably more interesting. But on surface, everyone loves a dinosaur, and everyone who isn't being pirated currently loves a pirate. So,
see, the reason why I find it, I wrote the question, so I'm so biased. But like the reason for me where it's an interesting tension is robots are this kind of antithesis of spirituality, like they're a scientifically constructed, very naturalistic thing, but then to have them as this spiritual entity, a ghost, I just find that funny. Like, it's an interesting idea that they've transcended into a different form. So that's where my brain goes with it anyway. But pirates who are dinosaur pirates,
whether or not ghosts, like, are we talking about spiritual ghost in the biblical sense? Because then there's a notion of soul, and then now we have to have the question of whether or not robots have souls, right? So
exactly, this is why my question is deeper than it appears on the surface, Alan. Thank you for unpacking it.
I'm not sure if you've seen it, but there's this completely AI art ethics aside, but there's this whole article about this ghost that exists within AI programs that is this incredibly creepy image that when you search certain things, it comes
the
up
lady
as
that keeps appearing,
so horrifying. Yeah.
I wasn't
love
sure
it that
because
we have this AI art and already we have ghost stories attached to it.
Well, did you also see probably about 4 months ago, there was a person who was working on some of the Google AI stuff, and they were claiming that one of the AI systems was sentient, like they were defining it as sentient. So I don't know. What's this say? What does Stuart say? Okay.
I won't go into the details, but yeah, there's a whole thing about pareidolia that sort of talks about humans' capacity to pattern recognition, and what we're doing with those AI images is actually more us trying to sort of derive meaning out of things that are just random. But anyway, we won't go into that.
We'll do the spin-off podcast of like technology intersecting with culture, philosophy, and stuff.
Stuart is pitching a tabletop games mag at the moment, and he's volunteering to write it, and it will make it a lot easier to do the social media marketing that Shannon leaves. Yes.
Don't we have the campaigner? Is the campaigner not running anymore?
I think campaigner still around.
I must confess I haven't checked for a while, but I thought Matt was still working on it. But I think it is very much it happens when it happens type thing. I don't think it has a set schedule from memory. Mm-hmm. There is a couple of tabletop mags though. I thought there was 2. There's a UK one I was aware of, and there was one other, but then I've forgotten their names. I have a feeling there was a couple that still were around, but again, I think their distribution doesn't really hit Australia. Like it's mostly European or American focused.
Maybe this is just me and my friend group, but I feel like, does anyone even read magazines anymore?
Oh, really?
I subscribed for the last... So when the pandemic started, I subscribed to 2, because I used to, 10 years ago, I used to subscribe to magazines and enjoy reading them. And I subscribed to 2, and I kid you not, like, I've now cancelled the subscriptions after 2 years, because I think I opened, like, 2 of the copies. Like, I just never read them. And, it's so crazy. But, I think there is an appeal for me. I could see an appeal for anything that's really visual, so like zines or zines, whatever you want to how you say it, where there's a lot of like art, like printed, pictures. I think that.
Yeah. I have an idea. I want to just pitch it to you guys. What if the magazine, which is in the physical form, actually contained game playable aspects of the game? So, if the magazine had like perforated cardboard pieces that actually you rip out, and then it's actually a small game that sort of not a full game, but more like hey, this could be like an inspiration for designers, so you can try out like through a different sort of example mechanics, just to see sort of essentially it's like a designer's guide.
It sounds a bit like a fancier version of that envelope game that you were referring to last week, like a game in an envelope.
Well, I'm again trying to insert my agenda to LPT to say, hey team, what do you think of this idea? But if
I love it. Let's pay for 50 designers to do 50 games. A weekly magazine goes out. Perfect.
Oh God, no.
You know what the story is?
One who has to manage them.
I think we are missing one of those mystery box escape room ongoing adventures that you can get in the States, but which I think where it pretends to be from a real person who's gone to Atlantis, and it sends you an updated note, some puzzles, and a fun little piece of gear or something. And they have them in the States and Europe, but
that's basically fun.
The thing about magazines for me is that unless there's a novel aspect to them, then I rather just read them on the internet. But if it's a physical, book that has a function to it that serves beyond just reading material, that actually has a purpose for game designers, because again, we are working in a physical space. So a magazine does have relevancy to what we do. As long as we can kind of transport what we're reading in the magazine and take that out and somehow apply that to our trade in a physical form, like this is like
what if we go more simple? What if we go more simple though? And you remember, like, I used to do the magazines where you'd pay, and you get like a piece of the model, or you'd get like I had ones where I got Star Trek starships, and so like each week, so we could have a game where you get a piece of the game every issue. So after maybe 10 years, you've got your full game ready to, like, you can actually play it after all those issues is done. But
the thing is, again, LTT would be doing this mostly for the tabletop creator community, so it has to be something that the creators want, not so
I'm just being stupid saying, imagine getting a game by mail every month with one piece, like one card, one token, and it's going to take forever to get the full game. Stuart has an interesting idea. How about a multiplayer voting game to decide which path to take?
Actually, I did something
like a choose
similar
your
to
own
that
adventure.
during, I did that in the Kickstarter for Runica and also Lucidity, actually. I had the next stretch goal was based on the path that voters decided, or that backers decided to take through a arbitrary story that I was telling.
I did forget to ask you in the main interview, but you've got your first two games, or those other two games had the 6-sided, in their title. Is that a thing that you're going to be taking into future? Like, do you have more in that series that you want to do?
Maybe. Runica was kind of emerged from Lucidity. It was originally a kind of, it was called Archly Scheming, instead of Lucidity's original name, which was Darkly Dreaming. And and as opposed to being a dreamer trying to escape from the nightmares, and then eventually you gather enough of that nightmare element and you become that nightmare. It was about students at an arcane college who were trying to learn enough about each of the elements, but if they learned too much about one, then they would be drafted in to be a professor of it. And then I kind of added more and more elements, and then I added a spinning disc to it and changed up how you win, and the game kind of progressively evolved into something that was nothing like the original. So that's why it was 6-sided. It was kind of that last homage to its origins.
There you go. All right, I think we've got 3 more questions. Gosh, we haven't got very far at all. What's your favorite snack or drink when playing a tabletop game?
I think I'm a sucker for those really dodgy flavored bananas. The ones that no one ever wants from the.
I like them. I bought a bag of them probably like 2 months ago just to experience it. I guess it must have been I didn't go back and buy more, but no, I can see the appeal. Yeah.
I think it needs
the correct
to be
answer was
balanced
Pepsi
out.
Max. That's fine.
Yes, the correct answer is Pepsi Max, which I've got some right here.
Intriguingly,
the other thing though.
Games, sorry, go on.
No, you go.
Just on the Pepsi bandwagon, we discovered our last role-playing night that Mountain Dew goes very well with all kinds of alcohol. So not to send this this vidcast past 18 plus,
Look,
but you can make a really nice gin and tonic with
So Kate, hang on. By this count, Kate, we're going to have a Power Tool sponsor and now an alcohol sponsor. This doesn't seem like a good.
Hey, you've got
doesn't look a good combo though. Yeah. Alan mentioned last week in M&M's, I think you said in your answer to the question, and I have to tell you, Alan, that you affected me, and I've gone and bought M&M's. I've now got the peanut ones and the crispy ones here because I like the crispy ones, and I only bought them because they. Yeah. I know, well, I'm saving them. I only bought them though because they came up on the podcast, and I was like, when I was at the shops, I'm like, oh yeah, M&M's, sure.
I have successfully shielded for M&M.
Yeah. You're gonna get that kickback. All right, the next question, Shannon: cards or dice?
Oh, come on, that's an easy one, Shannon.
It's controversial maybe because I think actually cards is what I would go for.
What? That actually genuinely surprised me.
I was sitting there going, I know what he's going to say. Look at his
You
heard it here
seemed
first.
like enough.
No, the thing is, I have always been trying to make a card game, and every time I try and make a card game, I end up using dice in place of the cards, and it just works better. But one day I will create a card game. The problem is that with cards that are deck builders, you have to shuffle that deck a lot, and it's so much easier to pick up a couple of dice and re-roll them rather than to pick up an entire deck and reshuffle it.
Yeah. That's a fair point.
So
I haven't played any.
Well, something like we were talking about Midnight Suns earlier. Something like that works so much better as a card game because essentially you're rolling dice on whatever you draw, but then you have the control over what you have drawn to play on each turn to kind of to use the information that or the luck that you've been given in a way that works really well.
And another thing I really like about cards is that you can there's multifunctional aspects that you can do with cards, because there's more real estate, like visual real estate that you can use to do things like the front of the card, back of the cards, side of the cards. One thing that
side of the card.
And
what do you do on the side of the card? It's like so thin.
No. I meant like side, as in like
you rotate it.
Spread it around.
I thought you meant like the edge, and I'm thinking, how do you do anything with that?
You could. So I was thinking about edge printing. So if you have a deck, and then you can actually print along the edge of that. So that is possible.
Yeah.
And you can have certain aspects of the game sort of work into, when you turn it back into a deck, what kind of shape it sort of does, or what kind of colors it sort of, I don't know, something you can do there.
Interesting, yeah. Could never sleeve that. There would be some people who would be opposed to it just on the basis you could never sleeve. But I was just thinking about Tribes of the Wind that's just come out, which is using the backs of your opponent's cards as resources to play your own cards, which is such an interesting thing.
I've never heard of it. Okay, wow.
It's, if you like Studio Ghibli, it's a really beautiful, like Nausicaa Valley of the Wind style art style. At least I think that's what they're going for with it.
All right, and the final question: what fictional character would you invite to a game night?
I think either of the Marvels, Miss Marvel or
Captain Marvel.
or Captain Marvel. Yeah.
Wait a minute.
That is such a good answer.
From the original Marvel, Shazam. He's the
was he? Yeah,
He's
that's
the original.
true.
Mr. Marvel,
the most recent DC
even pre-DC, he
Shazam.
was.
The most recent version of him, I think, would be fun to play a game with. But I think Miss Marvel would be the most fun to play a game with, because she actually is
Kamala
excited
Khan,
about things like that.
Yeah.
I'm such a big Carol Danvers fan. When you just mentioned her, I'm like, oh, of course, that should be awesome. Yeah, very cool. All right, well, that's everything. So thank you very much again, Shannon, and thank you, Kate and Alan, and I hope everyone has a good Christmas and gets to enjoy some time with those that they care about.
Yep.
And all that stuff, all that schmaltzy stuff that we talk about at this time of year.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas to all of you as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Happy Christmas.
Have a lovely weekend. Even if you don't celebrate Christmas, enjoy the day off if you're getting it. I hope you are. Everybody is, gearing up for the new year. We may see you next week. We may not. We might go crazy.
Yeah.
Go,
we'll
Friday afternoon.
We don't know. Shannon might be on next week. He might not even get to next year. It might be just this year we have the next. Just teasing. It's all right. Let's set expectations, everyone. Don't expect Shannon next week, okay? But in 12 months, maybe.
Yeah,
all right. Thanks, everyone.
What I haven't done.
Yeah, that's right. We'll have to rewatch the episode, and we'll write down all the same questions that we asked, and we'll just do the same things again. I wonder. Actually, it is an interesting thought. It is an interesting idea, though. Like, what will the landscape be in 12 months for things like crowdfunding and all that? Like, I wonder what our attitudes. Yeah, that is an interesting idea. Like, just where's the future going to go? All right. Well, we'll wrap this up. So, thanks everyone, and see you in the future.
Bye.
Bye.